Good evening. I have 7 o'clock, and I'm going to call the special city council meeting to order and ask the city manager to call the roll.
Councilmember David,
Present.
Councilmember Dean,
Here.
Councilmember Hamburg,
Here.
Councilmember Schmitz,
Here.
Councilmember Welch.
Present.
You have a quorum, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So this next item on the agenda is reading by the city attorney, and a written request for a special meeting is read and entered at length in the minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Request for a special city council meeting dated March 10th, 2025. The Honorable Jim Benage, Mayor of the City of Bel Aire. We, the undersigned council members of the City of Bel Aire, Kansas, hereby respectfully request you to call a special meeting of the Bel Aire City Council to be held at the Bel Aire City Hall, 7651 East Central Park Avenue, Bel Aire, Kansas, on Tuesday, March 11th at 7 p.m. for the purpose of consideration of an ordinance supplementing ordinance numbers 365, 417, 457, 517, 586, and 618 of the City of Bel Aire, Kansas, authorizing the execution of an amended and restated sixth supplemental water supply and wastewater service agreement with Chisholm Creek Utility Authority, and authorizing all other necessary documents and actions with respect thereto. 4 signatures from Councilmember Tyler Dean, Emily Hamburg, Tom Schmitz, and John Welch, pursuant to a request for a special council meeting dated March 10th, 2025, and signed by at least 3 members of the council. Mayor Benage signed, thereby calling a special meeting of the governing body of Bel Aire, Kansas, pursuant to Bel Aire City Code 2.1.5, to be held at the time, place, and purposes specified in the written request. Thank you.
Thank you. So the main item on the agenda is item 4, considering an ordinance supplementing certain ordinances within the city. And Mr. Kevin Cowan from Bell and Gilmore is here to explain all this plethora of documents that he's got for us tonight.
Good evening, Kevin Cowan with Gilmore and Bell, City's Bond Counsel. As the mayor said, your action tonight is simply to consider and pass an ordinance. The ordinance does a number of things. It amends and supplements, and the city attorney read a string of ordinances from past years, and those are all the ordinances that relate to CCUA bond issues. So you have an original ordinance that looks something like a utility revenue bond ordinance. It has city financial covenants as it relates to its operation of its utility systems and things like that. Since that time, so that was 2002, since that time, whenever additional bonds have been issued, there will be another ordinance to supplement that and recognize some things have changed. We have another series of bonds. We have a supplemental service agreement that changes our payment schedule and any of the other associated changes. So that's what this ordinance does. It's pretty short, but again, does a number of things. The primary thing is to acknowledge and approve the amended and restated 6th supplemental water and wastewater service agreement with CCUA. This is the same agreement in large part that you all approved last year that recognizes cost of service and true up concepts. That agreement required any future bond issues to be subject to the same cost of service true up provisions. And so the way the documents were drafted, this occurred so quickly in time after that, we're just amending and restating that. We're not changing any of the other things in the 6th supplemental agreement. We're just adding the bond things to it and recognizing we now have some additional bonds. So that's what's in the service agreement, and that's what this approves. Thought I would just hit some highlights. The bonds are insured. There are a couple of references in the ordinance to bond insurance and things that the bond insurer wants the city to agree to, giving them notice of important events. The bond insurer is Assured Guarantee. It's the same bond insurer that's insured CCUA's bonds 12, 15, 17, and now. And they're one of the few players left in the game that survived the Great Recession. With their involvement, the issue gets a AA rating, which is a notch better than what CCUA's independent rating was. And the thought is that opens up some more potential purchasers. If you have that little bit better rating, there is a requirement that rating and bond insurance pay for itself. So the purchaser of the bonds will certify that AA rating gained through bond insurance saved more in terms of debt service improvement than what the premium on the bond insurance costs. So that is a federal tax requirement and a good one. I mean, going in, this has to be worthwhile to get the bond insurance. I mentioned the service agreement, and I'll touch on it a little bit as I hit some high points on the bonds. If you haven't heard, I know three of you at least got to hear about the details of the bonds, but the bonds were priced and sold a week ago. Very successful. I think by all accounts, probably the best day in the last few months that bonds could have been priced. Just a dip in the market that day. And you may recall that when we talked about selling the bonds, there was kind of a maximum principal amount anticipated at $23 million. Turns out the issue is $22,750,000, but also a true interest cost of 4.75. And so, a month later, actual sale and pricing of the bonds, that true interest cost is 3.97. And I don't know if you're like me, that's kind of a psychological barrier that this came in less than 4 on a 20-year issue. And it's not a general obligation of anybody. It's not supported by taxes. So again, really successful sale. The bonds will fund the project fund, which will pay construction costs and include about $1.1 million in contingency. There's $600,000 built into the construction contract or bid itself for contingencies, and then the bonds added another $500,000. There was a lot of discussion of that at the CCUA level, just comfort with that. About $1.1 million on a $23 million issue. It's about 5% contingency. If it doesn't get spent, it can always be applied to next debt service. Who knows, by the time you're through this project, there may be some other improvement at the wastewater facility that you hadn't even thought of. It could be applied to that. So with that, the debt service added with these bonds for the next several years is about $1 million a year. This was wrapped around the existing debt service on CCUA bonds, which is pretty heavy through 2032. And that's when all of the original improvements will be paid off. Bonds will be retired. So then starting in 2033, the debt service jumps up to about $2.3 million per year. And that runs through 2045 when the bonds will be retired. The wastewater amended and restated 6th supplemental agreement provides that these bonds, because we're now on the cost of service model with true up, the debt service for budgeting purposes is split 50-50, but it is subject each year to the true up. So these numbers that I just mentioned, the $526,000 in interest per, or $1,052,000, so it's 526 every 6 months, and then the 2.3 million show up in Exhibit C to the amended and restated 6th supplemental agreement as new variable base charges, we call them. The base charges are your obligation on the bonds. And so it's just cut in half. If you look at the schedule, this new agreement will obligate you each year to agree to pay at least 50% of this new debt service. So it's $526,000 a year initially in interest, and then it's 1.171 thereafter as you start paying principal. And again, I want to emphasize this, that will be trued up. So if it turns out it's a 60-40 split on usage, you budgeted and paid 50%. If you were the 40%, you're going to get the benefit of the true up, not only on the O&M costs, but also the debt service on these bonds. So the only thing that will remain fixed after this is the debt service on all of the prior bonds. Can't change that. that's just part of the agreement. But those, again, will be retired nearly entirely, if not entirely, by 2032. There are two smaller principal payments on some bonds after 2032, but it may be that the bond reserve can pay those off in 2032. So again, long time. Ted mentioned it. It's been a long process, but this is sort of it. The plans have been approved by KDHE. Notice of award granted on a construction contract, and now you're selling the bonds to pay the project costs. With the passage of the ordinance and approval of the amended and restated 6th supplemental agreement, you'll have locked in your obligations on this. So I'll stop there. I could talk for a very long time about this transaction, but those are the detailed things that you're considering tonight.
All right. Well, thank you for the review. And does anybody have any questions for Mr. Cowan? Well, it's been a long road. I'm glad we're getting to this end. So, but it's very good.
In all honesty, I work on a lot of bond issues. I'm about as excited to close this one later this month than I have been on one in a very long time. So, yes, I'll add that I will leave here tonight and go to Park City, and they're having their regular meeting. They will be considering and approving the same things. And the CCUA board met last Thursday.
Right.
So that will be all the approvals, and then it's a gathering of signed documents and transcript and preparing for closing later this month.
Do you need those documents signed before you leave here to go
No.
to Park City? Okay.
No. Interesting fact, we'd sort of described to the Attorney General's office, who's going to review the transcript. They have some new people, what's coming with this one. And they asked for the transcript without signature pages, if that would save, without signed pages, if that would save a day or two. So we've already sent these documents up today via FedEx. We'll take the signature pages whenever you have them. If you sign them tonight and they're ready in the morning, Ted, I can swing by in the morning, or if it's the next day, and then we'll package those up and send those to the AG's office and tell them where they belong in the transcript of proceedings.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. So, and no questions or comments, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I motion to approve an ordinance supplementing ordinance numbers 365, 417, 457, 517, 586, and 618 of the City of Bel Aire, Kansas, authorizing the execution of an amended and restated 6th supplemental water supply and wastewater service agreement with Chisholm Creek Utility Authority, and authorizing all other necessary documents and actions with respect thereto.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Smith, a second by Ms. Hamburg. Any other questions or discussion? If there are none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign. And that motion carries 5-0. Thank you.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. And then we can move to adjournment.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion by Mr. David, a second by Mr. Tyler Dean. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, same sign. And that motion carries 5-0. We are adjourned, ready to move into the workshop. We'll wait.